I can't believe the year is almost over. It's crazy to think about, really crazy. But it also presents the perfect opportunity to think about all that went right and wrong this past year. And in the market, things went far more right than wrong, which is exciting. But it's an opportunity to think about what you did from an investing standpoint, the strategies that you employed, and how you can take those strategies and ultimately glean learnings from them that will help you in the coming year. It's also a great opportunity to think about the year ahead and to start to, in advance, think about some of the things that you want to do from a business standpoint, that is you in your own life, the work that you do, if you're in the investing world, if you work in equities or if in any type of financial services, that's great. But probably the bulk of people listening to this podcast don't, and you're in a different career. Maybe you want to get into financial services or you want to be a better investor. This is definitely a good opportunity to talk about ways in which you can do that. But in your day-to-day life, in your career, it's also a great opportunity to take stock and think about, are you happy? Are you happy with where you are in your career, in life, in general? And as the year comes to a close, it's an opportunity to, if you're not, turn the page and start again. And it's nothing new to talk about January is wiping the slate clean, but I do think that in business as in life, the beginning of the year is always a great opportunity for a fresh start. So thinking about that, thinking about fresh starts, one of the ways in which we can start the year fresh is by taking a look at sectors poised for a breakout. Now, we all know this year was pretty incredible, as was 2023. 2 years in a row where the S&P is up more than 20%, and in this instance, significantly more than 20%, closer to 27, 28, depending on where the market will end in the final days of trading or the final sessions of trading between now and December 31st. Be that as it may, equities are really, for the most part, pretty overbought. Prices are high. Multiples are high. It is not a cheap or inexpensive market. That said, there still are some sectors poised for growth. One of those sectors is gaming. You might ask, why is it a good time to start investing in gaming? Gaming is a $244 billion industry. And some estimates have this sector growing at over 10% compound annual growth rate over the next 5 years, putting gaming at almost $400 billion by 2029. $400 billion by 2029. And this is conservative. Other estimates have gaming at over $500 billion by the end of the decade. To put things into perspective, Hollywood is about a $100 billion industry. They have about an 8% CAGR, or at least they're predicted to over the next 3 years. On the podcast, you've heard me talk about Nintendo. This is a stock I'm incredibly bullish on because in addition to gaming, they have parks, they have merchandise, they have films, and they have some of the most recognizable intellectual property in the world. What I want to talk about today, however, is not Nintendo. It's Take-Two Interactive, TTWO. They own studios such as Rockstar Games, the maker, of course, of Grand Theft Auto or the Grand Theft Auto franchise. Take-Two is trading at $181 at the time of this recording. And I'll be honest, I like Take-Two better at $155 or $160. This is where they were trading at the end of October. But nevertheless, I still believe this is a good opportunity as there has been a 6% dip over the past week or so. The reason I like Take-Two, and there are several reasons, but firstly, gaming industry is highly cyclical. And cyclicality can be a double-edged sword. It can definitely be a double-edged sword if you don't understand the seasonal trends or if they're hard to predict. In this instance, I believe if you study the stock, if you understand this sector, you can pretty easily predict the direction the stock is going to move. To that point, let's listen to CEO Strauss Zelnick, who said this on November 7th, 2025, and I quote, "As we look ahead, we believe Take-Two remains exceedingly well positioned for the long term. Our vision is clear, our talent is unparalleled, and we have one of the strongest portfolios of owned intellectual property in our industry, with many exciting new titles coming in fiscal 2026, including Grand Theft Auto 6 in the fall, Borderlands 4, and Mafia: The Old Country. We expect to create long-term value for our shareholders, yada, yada, yada. This year, Take-Two is up 13%, which is about half of what the S&P is up. So compared to the S&P, it's not been a great year. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I actually think that's a good thing because they're not as overbought, certainly, as the rest of the market. I also don't think that's unexpected because Take-Two stock performance, of course, is going to be very closely correlated to game sales, but also annual releases. What new games are coming out each year? And this year did not bring 2024 a strong slate of new releases. You had WWE 2K24, which obviously is a wrestling game. You had Top Spin Tennis 2K25. You had Star Wars Hunters, and you had NBA 2K24, which is the biggest release of the ones I mentioned, selling about 9 million units as of May. I think they'll probably finish the year at 10 or 11 million units based on sales for 2K23, and 2K obviously is a franchise. They come out with a new game every year, which is a good thing. This is not the exciting part of the story. The fact the stock is up 13% this year with minimal blockbuster releases is a good sign. So what should we be excited about? In 2025, it's Civilization 7, Mafia: Old Country, another NBA game, 2K25, another wrestling game, and most importantly, and this is the catalyst, Grand Theft Auto 6, which is going to be one of the greatest selling video games of all time. You heard me right, one of the greatest selling video games of all time. GTA 5 sold 205 million copies. The online content offered, in addition to the base game, creates a new experience as such that it's essentially a new game with every update. And that is the brilliant part of it. Grand Theft Auto 6 will, of course, do the same thing. And the net is you buy the initial game for between $60 and $150. Then you get all the following updates periodically throughout the year. And GTA Online keeps recreating scenarios in the same world that the base game brings you and the Grand Theft Auto franchise is known for. Some examples are in GTA 5, the Doomsday Heist, Smuggler's Run, Arena War, Agents of Sabotage, The Contract. The innovation here is that they have created this online world which is always a fictional city that somewhat closely mirrors a real city or state. GTA 6 is set in Leonida, which is essentially Florida, and then they're bringing back Vice City, which mirrors Miami. The game is never stale because they're constantly updating it. You can play it for 50 hours. You literally can play it for 500 hours as a single player. Then when you feel like you've done all you can do in that experience, you can enter the online world and delve into all these highly detailed experiences. The game morphs then from a driving game and a heist simulator to a racing game, to a real estate game when you're trying to start a business or a gang. And I'll admit crime tends to be at the center of it because that's fun. But the level of realism is, if you've never gamed before, it is like nothing you've ever seen. I can't really game at this point in my life. I don't have time. Also, it's highly addictive for me because games like this are flawlessly designed. These developers, I cannot take my hat off to them enough. As soon as an element in the game becomes uninteresting, they think of a new element to incent you to play more. These are the best developers in the world. Talk about gamification of everything. It's not just the game. It's a mini game within a game within a game. It's like the inception of gaming. You know, they go so deep, so meta on all the experiences they pack into this game. It just makes your head explode. All of the online updates I mentioned are, let me put it this way, they completely change the dynamic of the game. Like I said, from heist to racing to smuggling to espionage to government and clandestine ops, it goes on and on. They think of a real world scenario. And these scenarios tend to be the same type of high stakes, high conflict scenarios that every action movie revolves around. Let me give you an example. In the GTA 4 mission, Three Leaf Clover, you're robbing a bank. It's this breathtaking heist, but the weapons you use, the outfits you wear, the suit and balaclava combination, the scene is almost identical to the movie Heat and the bank robbery scene. The most famous one. It's one of the most unbelievable scenes. Michael Mann is a favorite director of mine. But if you play that particular mission, you undoubtedly will recall very specifically the movie Heat. In addition, there is in GTA Vice City, there is a scene that almost like beat for beat mirrors the I'm funny how. I mean, funny like a clown scene from Goodfellas. There are scenes from The Godfather, or missions, I should say, from The Godfather, from French Connection, from Scarface, from so many other movies. The point is that as you're playing the game, you feel like you are playing a movie or you're in a movie. That's how immersed you feel. You feel like you're in a movie. What gamers love, however, is that all of this online content is free. You pay $60 to $150 for the base game, but then whether it's in some instances, multiple times a year, at least 2 or 3 times a year, but in some instances, many more times than that, they're just constantly releasing all of this free online content. But the way Rockstar is the developer, as I mentioned at the top of the podcast, owned by Take-Two, the way that they monetize this is through online microtransactions ranging from a few dollars to hundreds of dollars. You, the gamer, exchange your real currency for in-game currency called shark cards. And this currency can be exchanged for luxury vehicles, properties, weapons, and upgrades all in the game. You can also subscribe to GTA Plus for $5.99 a month, and this gets you additional exclusive features, content, etc. But you don't have to. The fact that there is a choice is perceived very positively in the gaming community. Developers like EA also have online content on top of their base games or DLC, but they always charge for it. And that has absolutely tanked games like Battlefront 2, where you have a pretty epic game and battle scenario set in the Star Wars universe, and the game is polished. Like I said, it's well designed, but the nickel and diming of these constant microtransactions set off what was tantamount to an in-game revolt, and people stopped playing it. They rated it poorly, they complained on social media, all really negative stuff. Take-Two's strategy has been far better in that they have managed all of these online content drops for free. And then again, if you want to subscribe, if you want to take advantage of some of the additional features, customization, etc., you can buy the in-game currency and shark cards, but you don't have to. So it ends up being a win-win for everybody involved. You can probably tell at this point just how bullish I am on Take-Two based on the upside of the new Grand Theft Auto release. There's also Civilization, and Civilization 7 is set to release February 11th, 2025. It'll replace Civilization 6, which was released almost a decade ago. But in that time, Civilization games have sold 73 million copies, which is a staggering number, probably equating to between 3 and 4 billion in sales. I think there's a tremendous amount of upside with Civilization. Some analysts have said, okay, we acknowledge that Civilization is going to be a blockbuster game, as will the new Grand Theft Auto. But we think that much of this upside is already priced into the stock. I think this is absolutely ludicrous. If you look at past releases, usually if this is a game, like, obviously this is not true for games that come out each year, like WWE, like NBA 2K, but for their biggest games, Red Dead Redemption, Grand Theft Auto, Civilization, you typically see a bit of a long tail where the stock is up year one, but really it's up even more year 2, 3, or 4 after the big release. And so much of that has to do with the way that they are monetizing the online content and making that as sustainable as possible, and probably the margins that they're able to get after they've spent all the time developing the base game. Take-Two also has a mobile game division, and Zynga's a studio they acquired in May 2022 for $12.7 billion. So also need to take into consideration this mobile revenue. All right. In fiscal year 2024, which for them is April 23 to March 24, Take-Two reported total net revenue of approximately $5.35 billion. Mobile gaming was, in the first 9 months of fiscal 24, about $2 billion, which exceeded company expectations. That's great. Second quarter of fiscal 24, mobile gaming accounted for 50% of Take-Two's total revenue. But again, this is because this was not a big new release slate. This year was not a big new release year for them. All that said, mobile is great, and it's clearly an important part of their total $5.35 billion currently. But this upside, or Take-Two's upside, is all about new releases, as I said. And the likelihood that Civilization and Grand Theft Auto 6 will be poorly received is very, very low. And I say that for a couple reasons. One, they have spent an incredible amount of time, a decade, developing these games, an incredible amount of time. So these certainly aren't like rushed releases. You think about rushed releases and you think about other gaming companies like CD Projekt Red and their Cyberpunk release, which had incredible promise. Keanu Reeves was voicing the main character, really wild story, very eye-catching visuals, but ultimately just so many bugs for months post the release. And that really dragged the game down, so much so that they had to totally re-release the game. And I think a year later they did, and they got it right, and it was fantastic. It was everything it should have been a year prior. But for an entire year almost, the name of the developer, and this is the same developer who developed the Witcher franchise, which if you watch the Netflix series with Henry Cavill, that's what obviously The Witcher is based on, is the series of games, which actually is based on a series of books that are very good in the fantasy world. But Witcher 3 specifically, and Witcher Wild Hunt, one of the most beloved video games. Also, that's the same company, CD Projekt Red, but this is kind of goes to show that even if you have a good developer, when they have unrealistic expectations, you can have a negative release. That is not what you can expect or should expect from Take-Two. If you look at past Grand Theft Auto releases, if you look at Red Dead Redemption release, past Civilization releases, the level of care and polish that they put day one on a new release is extraordinarily high. I think they set the bar in terms of industry standard. I think that's what you can expect here. So when you talk about this company, you obviously, as I've said a number of times now, you have to think about the new releases slated for 2025 and cyclicality, but this is one of those instances where you should have a very high degree of certainty that they will release quality products. They will sell an insane number of units week one, day one. I mean, they're going to sell 11, 12, 15 million units day one. This game in Grand Theft Auto is going to move like hotcakes. Civilization will sell very well, but not that well. You can expect great things. This is going to be one of the best video games of all time. It will. This will send the stock way up. This is why I think Take-Two should be on your radar big time between now and the end of the year. Now, at least, or at the latest, Q1, because it's just slowly going to creep up between now and then. So if you haven't considered this, now is the time. Take-Two's prime to make a move.